Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to center things in CSS. And right off the bat, I just want to say that there are many ways to center things in CSS. I'm going to show you guys a couple ways. I think these are the most intuitive and probably the best for beginners to start out with. So let's start just by making an indexed HTML file. So VS Code actually comes in with a built-in extension called Emote, and it allows you to do things like this, where I can just put an exclamation point, hit enter, and it lays out an HTML file for me. It's really helpful. I'm going to add in my style tags for CSS, and I'm going to add in a div with a class of box1. And again, Emote allows you to just write dot the class name, enter, and it will give you a div with the class of box1. And I'll just write box1 in here. So a really helpful extension that I use is called LiveServer. I mean, honestly, I feel like everyone uses it, but if you haven't heard of it yet, it's called LiveServer. And you can right click and open your file with LiveServer. And then you'll see on your browser your HTML file will appear there, and you can change it, save, and your browser will update. So I think one of the most helpful things you can do when learning CSS is to give things a background color, because it's very helpful to see what the element is that you're working with. So let's give box1 a background color of, we'll use hex code C5, C5, C5. So this tells us a lot of things right here. We can see that box1 is a div that spans the width of the screen. You can actually see that it doesn't touch the edges of the screen, and this is because body has built-in margin to it. So we can see though that if we want to center our text within the box1 div, that it would actually go in the middle here. So the easiest way to do that is to just give box1 a property of text align center. And we can see that the text goes in the middle of our div. So this is definitely the easiest way to center your text, but as you can imagine, it doesn't work in all scenarios. One example would be if, say, your box1 did not span the width of the screen. Let's add a width of 200 pixels. So you can see that very clearly box1 is only 200 pixels wide, and the text is centered within this div. If you didn't have the background color here, you can see how easy it would be to get messed up, especially when you have a lot of elements on your page. And you might be thinking, why isn't box1 in the center over here? And the background color will show you why. So in order to get this div in the center of our screen, we can't just use text align. And this is where it's really helpful to use Flexbox. Flexbox is very powerful, and if you've not really looked into it, I highly encourage it. I'm not going to make this video an entire tutorial on Flexbox, but I think it is important to know some basic properties. So in a nutshell, Flexbox gives us control of the direct children of a parent element. So let's see what that means. I'm going to change this to container1. I'm going to give it a child div of box1. Going to add some styling for container1. Let's just give it a background color of hex code 9C, 9C, 9C. And for here, we're going to do container one div. All this means is that these styles will apply to any divs that are a descendant of container 1. So just to reiterate, Flexbox allows us to move the direct children of a parent container. So we have the parent container here, and Flexbox allows us to move this child how we want. And it's very important to keep track of your divs, and I think this trips up a lot of beginners. So by direct children, I mean something like this. So the Flexbox property for here would give us access to move these 3 boxes because they're all direct children of this parent container. If you had a nested div in here, the Flex property on here does not give you access to control this. It only gives you access for the direct children. So it's very important to keep track of your structure of your HTML. So here we can see that our container is a div that spans the width of the screen, and our box 1 again has a width of 200 pixels, and right now it is not in the center of our screen, obviously. So the way we activate Flexbox for the container is on the container class we just write display flex. Now nothing happens here, but this gives us access to flex properties. I'm going to show you how to center this box first, and then I'll explain what's going on. So to center, you would use the justify content property and write center. All Flexbox properties are dependent on the flex direction of the Flexbox. And I know that sounds kind of confusing, but the flex direction property defaults to row. What that means is if this is where the Flexbox is starting, row basically says that there is an arrow pointing starting here and pointing to the right. This is the flex direction of this Flexbox from left to right. Justify content tells us how close to the start we want to be. So you can say justify content flex start, and it'll be at the start. You can do center, as we just saw, or you can do flex end. So since this is a centering tutorial, we'll leave it in the center. So let's say that our container has some height to it. Let's give it a height of 300 pixels. So you can see that justify content centers things left and right, but it doesn't center things vertically. So with Flexbox, it's pretty easy actually to center things vertically as well. All you need is the align items property. And it's pretty terribly named because there's also an align content, so you might screw it up. But for our purposes here, align items is what we want. So align item center, and there you go. So now you have your content centered both horizontally and vertically. One last thing to note with Flexbox is that if you don't actually define a width or height, it will shrink things to the minimum amount to fit the content. So if you see back here, if we had not actually given this a width, it would have actually shrunk and cut off the edges there. So that's just one thing to note when you're using Flexbox. But anyway, that's how to center things with CSS. If this video helped you guys out, be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'll see you guys next week.